Welcome to Reeves Rants. I got a good story for you today. It's going to expose liberalism as usual, expose the bias to the media as usual. You'll get to see one journalist who reports the news as she can, or reports it as best she can with as little opinion as possible. And then you'll see another liberal journalist who will literally use the exact defense that his female co-host just debunked for him. He will then, because the left has a very narrow view of how reality actually is. It's mostly based on fantasy and then imposing their beliefs about people onto those people. So if you haven't hit that like and subscribe button yet, go ahead and do that now, because let's roll into it.
Now enter Ben Smith. His interview with Tucker Carlson yesterday made headlines, and it should be taught in journalism classes as an example of what social scientists have been warning about for years: elite sorting.
Journalism used to be a working class trade. It was a very low status job. Journalists lived in working class neighborhoods. They saw themselves as outside of power, demanding justice on behalf of the little guy. By and large, the pathway to becoming a journalist now is through the elites, through elite universities. And that has, as journalists ascended to the ranks of the elites, they abandoned the working class that they used to belong to.
Tucker is one of the few true class traders in media, but let's assume for the sake of argument that everything he says and believes is wrong. Let's just put that assumption out there. Watch Smith question him. He asks if Tucker believes white people are superior. He asks what Tucker means by, quote, legacy American, and he asks about replacement theory. Take a look at this.
I'm interviewing you. Does that sound racist to you? You just suggested I'm a white supremacist. You know, I found that clip disturbing. I think the language of replacement theory, which you've popularized, the language of replacement theory is like specifically the language used by neo-Nazis.
The Democrats have been pushing this agenda of replacement theory for a long time, going all the way back to 1965, when Kennedy's brother had said, "This bill does not replace people. We are not trying to replace the American people."
Ted Kennedy of Massachusetts, the man who drove the bill, went out of his way to explain that the Democratic Party was absolutely not trying to replace the American population with more compliant foreign-born voters. No way. That's an insane conspiracy theory, he explained.
Why would you even mention, "I'm not trying to rip you off. I'm not a used car salesman"? People don't come out and volunteer that they're not doing bad things unless they kind of are, and they want you to not look at the bad things they're doing.
To recruit people to their cause. It has been, obviously, I'm not suggesting some straight line between words and actions, but it is the phrase that has been used by mass shooters. I wonder if you don't have any compunction or regret about popularizing that?
I want to point out how the interviewer is acting to Tucker Carlson. He's belittling him. He's nodding his head as if Tucker's stupid and speaking to Tucker as if he's stupid and imposing what he believes about Tucker onto Tucker instead of actually listening to what he's having to say. And this is that elite liberal crap that we're seeing from our journalists and seeing from the media, and why they are so disconnected and lack of understanding what we the people actually want and are thinking about.
This is why you are considered correctly a propagandist and not a journalist, because I just explained in detail with total sincerity what I believe. You ignored it and invoked mass shooters. So that's not what you just did. I asked you how you felt about it. I actually do want to ask you about something. I'd like to ask about something that actually I think we probably have more common ground on. How ridiculous you are, and I think it's evident to any fair person watching.
It is ridiculous to any fair person watching that man calls himself a journalist while never really asking any questions, but just imposing his beliefs upon Tucker just in the short clip that we just watched there. So when you call yourself a journalist or you're going to interview people, you have to actually ask questions and have a back and forth conversation instead of saying that this is what people believe and then just refusing to listen to anything else. Tucker gave him just what he said. He told him exactly what he believed, exactly what he thought about everything, and that man took an approach to immediately call white supremacy, neo-Nazis, all the different things he could possibly bring up just to attack Tucker and really just score points with his audience with no intention on exposing the truth at all. And that's, I think, the biggest problem with liberal Democrat media today is that they have no intention on telling the truth, but saying things how they want you to hear them.
I guess I'm trying to give you an opportunity to respond to
No,
things that
you're
have been
not.
said and written about you. But let's
You're
move
like,
to
white
something
supremacist,
that
mass
I'm really
shooter,
not
right,
looking
replacement
to
theory. And I'm
have
like,
a
does this
shouting
sound
match
like racist
with you.
ideology? And you're like, I'm disturbed by the Media Matters clip for 8 seconds. Like, are you being serious?
Unfortunately, he is being serious, and he does actually believe those things. And this is the biggest problem with liberalism and liberal Democrats to begin with, liberal media. Anybody liberal and Democrat, they are very indoctrinated to believe what they believe, and more so indoctrinated to reject anything that is not what they're already pre-programmed to hear. So as soon as they hear organic thought or people that say things that sound similar to the triggers that make them upset, they immediately fall back on an emotional response and regurgitate the same old talking points. This is what we've seen a million times from Democrats all the time. I only am using this because it directly exposes how he's speaking down to Tucker, how he is refusing to listen to Tucker, and even with all the evidence in the world, this man would still think whatever he's going to think, regardless, and speaks down to Tucker as if he's some sort of moral authority figure.
Okay, so media elites operate on these like crude stereotypes of the people with whom they disagree, and that clip is great because it shows how easily those stereotypes are demolished when you bring them face to face with the actual people being demonized. It shows the worldview there is kind of a house of cards.
She's bringing up what has become the biggest problem with liberal media and liberal journalists specifically is that they don't listen and they don't actually think through their thoughts all the way. And when they're met with opposition with facts that disprove their opinions and disprove their beliefs, they really don't know how to handle it because they have based all of their thought processes on their emotions instead of logical facts. And so it's easy, like she said, house of cards, when all you do is just claim somebody's a racist just to get them to stop talking.
When you come to a task like that with the lens of identity politics fixed on your eyes, you'll never really see critics fairly because that lens discredits critics as bigots.
There are disagreements. People aren't criticizing. People are actually living lives that are different than what liberals tell us and what the media tell us. So this isn't a matter of you're being criticized or that people are criticizing journalists or criticizing what liberals are saying. They're telling you that what we live, the lives we live, are not what you're telling us they are.
That is built into the premise of the lens, actually. People who dissent from every tenet of cultural leftism are perpetuating bigotry or insufficiently anti-racist and are thus bigots themselves.
So I inserted the definition of a bigot there so you could see that a bigot is someone who refuses to accept other people's viewpoints on life. And in most cases becomes a hypocrite because they say that you need to listen to them, but they're not listening to you. So that makes them a hypocrite. So in most cases, the very people who use the word bigot are in fact being a bigot by using the word bigot, is what she's actually saying. Because you're telling people that you're so tolerant as you're saying you're not tolerant to what they're saying. That makes you what you're accusing other people of being.
Now, at one point, Carlson told Smith, quote, "This is why you are considered correctly a propagandist and not a journalist, because I just explained in detail with total sincerity what I believe. You ignored it and invoked mass shooters. This is revealing how ridiculous you are, and I think it's evident to any fair person watching." I would hope so.
So remember that she said that because here shortly, her co-host is going to come on and is going to do everything that Smith just did and she already debunked. It exposes how very little liberals listen to people and how very little liberals listen to facts. Whatever their opinions are the facts that they impose upon the rest of us. And even if you had all the facts in the world to disprove these people, they will continue to believe what they believe, and her co-host will show us exactly that.
But Smith is not intentionally a propagandist. It recalls Noam Chomsky's famous 1996 interview with Andrew Marr. Quote, "How do you know I'm self-censoring?" Marr asked. Quote, "I'm not saying you're self-censoring," said Chomsky. "I'm sure you believe everything you say. But what I'm saying is if you believed something different, you wouldn't be sitting where you're sitting," said Chomsky.
What she's referring to is a theory that if you aren't a Colorado Rockies fan, for instance, then you won't watch the Rockies. You wouldn't be at a Rockies game. If you're not a leftist, then you won't think like a leftist. If you're not a Republican, then you won't think like a Republican. If you're not, so meaning that birds of a feather flock together in thought, that people hang around each other because they think like each other. So to expose yourself to any thinking other than what like you already think, you have to hang out with people who aren't who you already hang out with, because they already think just like you, and that's why you hang out with them.
Now, Smith isn't trying to carry water for Democrats or elites. He's not doing it on purpose, but it's actually fundamental to what he does. And what's so frustrating is that it doesn't have to be.
And this is where it needs to be corrected. What she said is that it's not fundamental to what he does. It's fundamental to who he is. It refers back to what she was just talking about the Noam Chomsky. He thinks like this, so therefore he imposes his beliefs onto people like this. He doesn't listen to other people's beliefs because he, in a lot of ways, believes that everybody else is either just stupid or just wrong or just refuses to listen to facts, instead of realizing that he could potentially be the bigot.
Again, let's, for the sake of argument, imagine Tucker Carlson is wrong about absolutely everything he says. Probably a lot of you agree with that. Is he a bigot? Well, the difference between a crackpot and a bigot is vast and meaningful.
You can see they are dramatically different. A crackpot's somebody who just doesn't know that they're wrong. So people who are just foolish, eccentric, they have great, maybe good ideas, maybe even out there ideas, but they don't know that they're wrong, or they're not specifically telling other people that they're wrong about their ideas. Whereas a bigot is telling you, you're wrong about your ideas while my ideas are right, which actually makes that person a bigot at the exact same time as calling someone else a bigot.
Ryan, Ben Smith's been around the sort of media landscape, and Tucker Carlson has as well, for a very long time. And this interview was just such a good example of somebody trying really hard to make a point that crumbled.
Watch the man on the left, the co-host, Ryan Grimm, and he will literally make the same exact argument that just got debunked by her and by Tucker Carlson right after his co-host just got done demolishing the idea and pointing out how it fell apart like a house of cards. He will regurgitate the same nonsense.
And again, think whatever you want about Tucker Carlson. His answers in substance to the questions Smith was making, I think were much more substantive than the questions themselves. And it's a good example of how you end up with the New York Times going from saying the Republican Party is the party that is like necessarily perpetuating bigotry, et cetera, to a surge of Hispanics identifying as Republicans. And the Times isn't able to reconcile those two things. And Smith isn't able to reconcile his idea of what the Republican Party is with what voters actually believe. And I think that's why it was so hard for him to engage with Tucker. But I'm curious for what your take was on the interview.
Well, I think it's hard for him to engage with Tucker because Tucker's saying like 5 different things, all of which contradict themselves, but he's doing it very effectively and very well.
No, Tucker said like 5 different things, all of which actually made sense. And because they didn't make sense to you or to Smith, therefore they didn't make sense to everybody else. But the truth is, what he said is that to every normal person, what they said does make sense. And she agreed upon it as well. The only two people here who are thinking this way are the liberals, the leftists, the Democrats, who are refusing to listen to what other people have to say and imposing their opinions and their belief systems about people onto people instead of listening to what people are actually saying.
It goes to how in this format of a back and forth where he's on the video, he's been doing this for years. He's extremely Tucker Carlson is very talented at this. That he doesn't have to make sense to kind of look like he's making mincemeat of his interviewer.
Just because you don't understand what somebody's saying doesn't mean that their talent is confusing you.
But just try to unpack what he's saying here. First of all, he says he's not really familiar with this replacement theory.
Everything that they have done through action, whether intentional or not, he showed in multiple episodes of his show about replacement theory and proof that the Democrat Party supports it, has written books about it, and wants it to happen because they believe they'll get votes that way.
Second of all, he says that the Democratic Party, their entire politics is organized around this replacement theory. So, okay, there you already have one fundamental contradiction.
I think you're kind of imposing, like a liberal again, imposing what you think he said and then calling that a contradiction when you don't really know what he was saying by saying he misunderstood it. And Smith didn't properly challenge him because he's not a good interviewer. So he didn't properly challenge Tucker to say, hey, you said you don't understand it, but yet you have a really good theory about it.
He never, ever addresses the question of how on earth you're going to get undocumented people to vote for Democrats. He just leaves that kind of hanging out there. And I
made it very clear. Within 100 days, I'm going to send to the United States Congress a pathway to citizenship for over 11 million undocumented people. And all of those so-called dreamers, those DACA kids, they're going to be immediately certified again to be able to stay in this country and put on a path to citizenship. We owe them. We owe them.
Tucker lays it out very clearly as to how the Democrat Party actually gets the votes. They believe that by allowing illegal immigrants to flood across the border and then give amnesty to those people, that then those people will be supportive of the people who allowed them to come across the border illegally and then get asylum or then get amnesty or citizenship. So it's been made very clear what the argument is. And again, you're dismissing the argument because illegal immigrants have, up until Myra Flores, have pretty much voted for Democrats in abundance. So to say you don't know how that's going to happen, you're misleading and you're lying and you know it.
Because he doesn't do a lot of kind of confrontational interviews, he doesn't get pressed on his show, and a lot of mainstream reporters won't even bother trying to interview him. They'll wind up like Ben Smith does. He doesn't get pressed on this, and I still can't make sense of it. So the Democratic Party's theory is that they're going to allow undocumented people to come across the border so that those people can then vote for Democrats. Yet the Democratic Party is not going to lift a finger for decades to create a pathway to citizenship, the only thing that could actually enable undocumented people to become citizens so they could vote for Democrats.
But he had 8 years he was vice president. He did nothing. It just shows that he has no understanding of immigration or the laws.
So you just got done saying that you don't understand what Tucker Carlson's argument was, but then you made Tucker Carlson's argument and then you said it was fundamentally wrong how he said it, but it's fundamentally right how you said it. There are plenty of sanctuary cities spread across this country, like San Francisco, like Chicago, that allow illegal immigrants to get driver's licenses and to vote. And you're misinforming your audience because you know for a fact there's sanctuary cities who allow people to vote who are illegal immigrants. And if you haven't liked and subscribed yet, you should definitely do so. Thanks for watching. Later.